Hey guys, what's up? It's Drew here, and today we're going to be doing a comparison that I've wanted to do for a pretty long time. We'll be taking a look at the difference in stability and recoil patterns in Destiny 2 with controller versus mouse and keyboard, and then we'll also be comparing this to Destiny 1. We'll also be taking a look at the flinch and the way that flinch is implemented and works with controller versus mouse and keyboard, and then comparing that to Destiny 1 as well. Firstly, I wanted to make a comparison of recoil with a high FOV, so 100 FOV, and console FOV, which is 72. So on the right is our recoil patterns with different weapons with 100 FOV, and on the left we have the same recoil patterns with 72 FOV or console FOV, and this is all with controller. So between the different FOVs, the recoil patterns themselves seem to be the same, which is expected, but with the console FOV, the same recoil seems to appear to be more drastic and sudden or sharp. I think this is simply because a lower FOV or field of view is more zoomed in, so the recoil patterns appear to seem more impactful and drastic, and of course 30 FPS on console certainly doesn't help with that. Personally, for me, this is a huge reason to play PC, even if you're primarily a controller player. Now let's move on and take a look at the controller stability and recoil patterns as compared to the mouse and keyboard stability and recoil patterns. Overall, the stability for mouse and keyboard is more stable. The visual recoil is less drastic, recoil is smoother, and shots seem to be more packed together, and the recoil patterns are just more consistent. In terms of specific weapons, scouts didn't seem to have much of a difference between controller and mouse and keyboard, although there is a little bit more stability, of course, with mouse and keyboard. Pulse rifles, though, do have some of the most obvious difference in my opinion. The recoil direction is generally the same. It's the same general shape or idea, but shots are far more packed together, and the recoil pattern as a whole is far less drastic, and the visual recoil is far less. This gives players using a mouse a clearer idea of where their shots are going and landing, and the tighter shots within a burst give more opportunity for players to consistently hit headshots without the recoil of the weapon drifting away from the head. Considering pulse rifles have a high damage output in such a short amount of time, this gives mouse users a huge advantage. This isn't to say that controller users can't use pulses, but the combination of a better recoil pattern, tighter bursts or shots within a burst, and just natural mouse precision makes these very powerful for mouse and keyboard users. Auto rifles, on the other hand, though, like scouts, only seem to have a small difference, again slightly better recoil direction, and the stability is a little bit noticeable. Hand cannons have far less stability with a controller as compared to a mouse and keyboard. The weapon's recoil itself is about the same in terms of the visual recoil, but there is a far bigger gap between each shot with controller. Similar to pulses, with the precision of a mouse and better overall stability, this makes hand cannons far more usable and consistent than with a controller. And this isn't even really considering how bloom comes into play. Just for reference as well, this was a Better Devils with maximum range spec'd out for each mouse and keyboard and controller. So it seems as though mouse and keyboard gets a higher stability because of the lack of aim assist. So because you have to be more exact and using a mouse is far more precise, I assume the stability model Bungie used for mouse recoil is relative to how forgiving or precise you need to be to hit shots. That being said, I still think that it enables pulses and hand cannons to be very powerful, especially compared to the current performance that they have on a controller. And again, as I've said, mouse can achieve a level of precision that controller just simply can't. I'd assume that Destiny's hitboxes are the same for both input methods, which in my opinion can be quite forgiving at times in Destiny, so the additional stability, even with the omission of aim assist, is an overall net gain in my opinion because of the potentially forgiving hitboxes and the increased precision that a mouse offers. So now let's go back and compare Destiny 1's recoil patterns to Destiny 2's recoil patterns and stability. So I took some weapons that are similar in both games and popular in both games and compared them to one another. As a whole, Destiny 1's weapons appear to have more stability and less drastic recoil. The stability in D1 almost looks like what is now mouse stability in Destiny 2. And on top of it, that was played with a controller with aim assist. Firstly, comparing Mida in D1 to D2, in D1 it seems like it had overall better recoil direction, almost like what you'd have to use a kinetic counterbalance mod to achieve in Destiny 2 right now, and had more overall packed together shots, and even considering that it fired more shots in Destiny 1 than Destiny 2, it still had less or about the same recoil as the Mida in Destiny 2, which would mean it has overall much better stability. In Destiny 1 though, the visual recoil bounce of the scope seemed to be a little more significant though. Prometheus Timepiece had a very similar screen shake and recoil when compared to the Darkest Before. They are of the same archetype, but it had far more packed together bursts, and recoil direction seemed similar, but it was far less drastic with the Praetor's timepiece. And again, bullets were more packed together similarly, but even a little bit better still perhaps than most recoil on PC. Hawksaw also followed the trend again when compared to the Nightshade, having a similar overall recoil direction, but again, far more packed together bursts of bullets. The screen shake and crosshair recoil is far less aggressive than on the Nightshade, and somehow, even being in 30 FPS, to me, manages to appear smoother. Auto rifle recoil looked quite similar. The Grim Citizen I had counterbalance on it, which is probably what made the recoil very linear and just purely vertical, but with a slightly bigger gap between each shot. Hand cannon recoil was the most appalling difference. In Destiny 1, the Palindrome looks similar, maybe even more consistent than most recoil with the Better Devils and D2, both of these weapons of course using their optimal roll of perks with the most range possible. Destiny 2's hand cannon recoil seems to drive up an entire wall, whereas in Destiny 1 it was not only more stable with less of a gap between shots, but the recoil direction was far more consistent, maintaining more of a linear pattern for the first 5 shots. In my experience in Destiny 2, after the first shot, it gets heavily offset and then you get more of a linear pattern afterwards. For argument's sake, I did also put here a high stability Better Devils, which isn't as bad, but it's still nowhere near as good in my opinion. So we've done our comparisons with stability and recoil patterns, but now let's compare Flinch and Destiny 2 between mouse and controller. For our Flinch test, I was using a Mida multi-tool and I was shot by an old-fashioned and a Darkest Before, two weapons that are popular, deal a good amount of flinch, but still not the most in the game, so you can expect more maybe from some other weapons like the Better Devils, or maybe Uriel's Gift and high cal weapons. I did use a Mida multi-tool to show the flinch because it's a popular weapon that a lot of people are guaranteed to have and know of. However, in our actual tests, I did try using like a hand cannon like Better Devils and pulse rifles and autos, and the recoil flinch, so the pattern in which they flinched when they were shot was about the same, so I don't think there's any real reason or need to be showing other weapons. At first glance, there doesn't appear to be too massive of a difference in flinch between both input methods. Mouse seems to get a little less, with a slightly noticeable difference, but the crosshairs for each weapon end up at around the same place after each shot, with again a little less flinch with mouse and keyboard, probably those scaled for the degree of precision and margin of error that you have with mouse. After being shot by the Darkest Before rather than a hand cannon though, it becomes much easier to notice a big difference in flinch between the input methods, with mouse flinch not moving off the target at all. Digging a bit deeper into the flinch dealt by hand cannons though, which looks like a pretty good amount, on controller when initially shot, there is a very sudden spike of a large amount of flinch. Far more so than, in my opinion, with a mouse. I noticed it initially on the first shot, but it's far more prevalent on the second shot, with the controller's crosshairs raising significantly above and off the target. In conclusion, to me, it's apparent that mouse experiences less flinch overall, which, as I mentioned, is probably meant to be scaled to its precision and margin of error compared to a controller, which has aim assist. That being said, controller experiences what I think is a ridiculous amount of flinch that has a far greater peak or spike than what the mouse experiences when aiming, and this really goes beyond inducing readjustment or reacquiring a target and accuracy, and is more of a huge instigator of just RNG gunfights. Mouse recoil and flinch does look much healthier, but it's understandable why controllers shouldn't have perhaps that much accuracy with aim assist, but again, in my opinion, controller needs to have less flinch overall. Flinch should just be enough to cause you to reacquire your target and readjust your aim after being shot or after each shot, but this is a little too much to me, which again just creates RNG gunfights. Being someone that's been trying to combat this for a while, with controller and D2, at least with scouts, pulses, or just maybe precision weapons as a whole, it perhaps seems more effective to aim for body shots and just allow the flinch to raise the crosshairs and hit headshots for you. In my first test, I had a Uriel's Gift shooting me to the body with high caliber rounds on, and I was aiming to the head with no recoil compensation, so just letting my crosshairs do what they're going to, starting to aim for the head and repeatedly pressing the trigger and shooting. In doing this, flinch caused me to only hit 3 out of 5 headshots that I would need for a kill. In my second test, using the same type of conditions and aiming for the body, I hit the initial body shot with the same 3 headshots hit, which is an overall gain in damage. And again, I didn't touch my right stick, I did not readjust my aim at all. In an attempt though to emulate more of a practical scenario, I aimed and compensated or readjusted my recoil as I normally would in actual play, but aimed more for the body, specifically aiming to hit the body, and against better devils, I was able to land quite a few shots. Now finally, to end things off, I want to compare Flinch to Destiny 1's Flinch, because in Destiny 1, I feel like Flinch was far less impactful. It was definitely there, but I feel like it's nothing compared to Destiny 2. In some actual tangible comparisons, Destiny 2's Flinch actually seems pretty similar to Destiny 1. Destiny 2 has less flinch even from the first shot, but afterwards it seems to be nearly exactly the same. I did notice though that Destiny 1's flinch seems to return to a lower resting position that actually stays far closer to the target. Almost like if I were to pace my shots a little bit, I could actually still be accurate despite the flinch. Or it's like I could readjust and naturally the crosshairs are going to fall closer back to the target, as I'd think they should. In my short time going back to play Destiny 1 and playing a couple matches of Rumble, Flinch felt far less aggressive or noticeable, although it was still, according to our examples, very similar. I'm really not so sure what makes it feel less influential. Perhaps it's the time to kill differences, Flinch returning to a lower resting position and potentially quicker, or perhaps is it the increase in recoil combined with the same level of flinch any longer time to kill altogether. Or maybe Flinch in Destiny 2 induces a lot more of vertical screen shake where it actually moves your crosshairs. In Destiny 1 it's more so just affecting the visual recoil of the gun. I'm really not exactly certain what makes it feel this way, and this does go against what is harder theoretical evidence that we have here, but something to me about D1's Flinch feels far less aggressive, or at least as influential as D2's Flinch. From playing Destiny 1 again shortly, I really realized why I loved Destiny 1. It was really all about the primary gunplay. I didn't like the ability spam, I didn't like a lot of things about the game, but one thing I always loved is the primary gunplay. To me, that's gone a little bit astray in Destiny 2. I love Destiny 2 and really enjoy it, but this is one place where I think they can definitely improve. I'm not exactly certain why they would give more recoil on weapons with a longer time to kill and seemingly more influential flinch, because more recoil on weapons means it's harder to get an optimal time to kill. More flinch on weapons means more random gunfights and harder to get an optimal time to kill, and that optimal time to kill is also longer now. I could understand keeping a lower time to kill and making more recoil that you'd have to really learn and flinch as something you can tangibly counter, because that would make a decent average time to kill that's more realistic, and for the players that are skilled enough to counter all that, they get a pretty low time to kill. Or on the other end of things, I understand making a longer time to kill but really pinpoint accurate weapons, so that if you're really great at the game, the only thing stopping you from getting your optimal time to kill is your own aim. And mouse and keyboard gameplay definitely gets closer to this second example, but the fact is that there's a lot of controller players, there's a lot more console players, and the game started on console, so why is it not playing as good as we know it to be in Destiny 1? Like I said, I love Destiny 2. I'm one of the few that like it more than Destiny 1, but in this area, I don't really understand what happened other than maybe they're just trying to minimize an individual skill gap. Anyways, that's enough of a rant. I hope you guys enjoyed the examples, the comparisons, and the video as a whole. I am doing an emblem giveaway, so if you'd like to enter, just be sure to leave your BattleNet, your gamertag, your PSN, whatever it may be, in the comments below. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and again, if you've done that already, put your thoughts in the comment below. It's well appreciated. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. It's been Drew here today, and I'll catch you guys later.